Alright, it's been a while, and we're back with some more New Jedi Order, starting with the long-titled Star Wars The New Jedi Order Agents of Chaos 1 Hero's Trial, the first in the subduology of New Jedi Order books with Han Solo's Agents of Chaos, a book about Han Solo coming to terms with grief, which mixes some interesting real-world events in with the book. This duology was written by James Luceno, who worked on this series, and at this point, if you've seen my previous Star Wars book reviews, you would know he is an architect within the Star Wars Legends novels, working on a prequel and a sequel to Revenge of the Sith directly, writing the lore novel for Darth Plagueis, and even working on a Tarkin lore novel and a Rogue One prequel for canon. Anyhow, James Luceno once had a writing partner in Brian Daley, the two using the same pseudonym to write Robotech novels in the 1970s. Brian Daley is also known for working on the original Han Solo novel trilogy in the 1980s and working on radio adaptations of the original Star Wars trilogy. Daley passed away in 1996 before the creation of the New Jedi Order series, but his Han Solo trilogy is seen as a classic in the field of Star Wars books, so perhaps it was prophetic that James Luceno would join the franchise soon after his friend's death and taking up the torch on the character he was once known for, Han Solo, in a duology of books for the New Jedi Order line dealing with the recent death of Chewbacca and the grief of losing a close friend and collaborator. You know, art reflecting reality, kind of. On top of that, Luceno lined his novels with reference after reference to his late friend's Han Solo trilogy. It is 25 ABY, 6 months after the death of Chewbacca, and the group finally comes together with Chewbacca's family to have a celebration of life ceremony for the fallen Wookiee. Han is starting to get past his constant haunting from the memory of failing to save Chewbacca, but the Vong War rages on, and despite avenging Chewbacca following the destruction of Cernpadal, Han still feels the need to stick it to the Vong after 6 months of wasting away and feeling bad for himself, so he heads off, bumping into an old friend Roa, who we previously met in the novel Han Solo's Revenge by Brian Daley. He confides in Han that he felt empty since the loss of his wife during the Vong War, and they decide to head off to find a traitor that was a mutual friend from the old days, Rek Desh. Meanwhile, the Yuuzhan Vong cook up a new plot to poison the Jedi with a plague, one related to Mara's illness from the previous novels. Elin and her familiar Vergir are sent to send this weapon upon the Jedi, claiming to have defected and are willing to come clean with this intel. As Han and Rose search, lead the duo to Ord Mantell, where they are asking around for info on Rek, who is confirmed to be the traitor working with the ruthless Yuuzhan Vong. Princess Leia is similarly on Ord Mantell, trying to bring diplomatic reason to the Stern Council, who doesn't want to take the Outer Rim refugees on when the Vong attack the system. The New Republic managed to fight it back, but during the struggle, the spaceship Han and Ro are on is attacked by a Vong organism that captures or kills Ro, though we don't know at first. In the process, however, Han meets Droma, a guy who is a skilled pilot and, like Han, an adventurer type. The pair create an alliance, with Droma trying to find his family who have been lost during the Vong War, and Han, who just has a vendetta against the group, when they wind up on the Queen of the Empire trying to escape the Vong. The ship also containing about 1,000 refugees stuck on Ord Mantell during the battle with the Vong. They start making their way towards Bilbringi when they meet Elin and Vergir, still on their quest to poison the Jedi, unbeknownst to Han, as they are attacked by Rek and his crew, the Peace Brigade, who are flanked by a Vong warship, and a hostage crisis ensues. Luke, Leia, and Mara hear of what's happening and make it to the Queen of the Empire in the Falcon, as Rek makes it off with Elin and Vergir to make it seem the Vong want the pair back. Han and Droma save the women, but under strange circumstances, as Rek and his crew are dead when they arrive. Han also notices the Vong are trying to make it look like an attack, when really they aren't being attacked at all. Knowing they are triple-crossing the New Republic, pretending to want to help, but actually hoping to meet with the Jedi, and seeing as they were the only ones who survived on the ship, Han confronts them, and they end up in a brawl with Elin, launching off the toxin she's been holding and dying, almost taking Solo with her, and Elin escaping. Han returns to Coruscant and finally makes amends with his son Anakin, who he initially blamed for Chewbacca's death, but now sees it wasn't his fault. as he was in a similar situation with Ro. He could either save his friend or the refugees, an impossible choice, but one that needed to be made, and ultimately it led to Ro's capture. He sets off with Droma to find Droma's family and find Elend, but Leia fears that he has regressed back into the scoundrel he once was as a way of coping with Chewbacca's death. Han Solo is the lead of this book, and following the death of Chewbacca, he went into reclusion, though following some time off, feeling sorry for himself, Han is back now, coming to grips with not only his friend's death, but the realization that he and his close circle are no longer as invincible as they once seemed. He and Chewie have been escaping scrape after scrape for decades, and the empty co-pilot chair next to him weighs on him heavily as a reminder that can no longer happen. Han feels bad at Chewie's funeral and is a little annoyed that Chewie's family feel the need to take Chewie's life debt to Han as an obligation of Wookiee culture. He is supposed to have Wookiee protectors till his death, but Han doesn't want that. He loves Chewie's family, but the life debt meant virtually nothing to him. By the time Chewbacca died, it had been so long, and at that point, Chewie was his friend and had his back in a way that no bodyguard could replace, and trying to do that with a family member just didn't feel right for him. Han is reverted to his pre-rebellion days in a lot of ways, taking big risks, taking things personally, and looking out for himself, much to the dismay of his wife Leia, the duo's marriage going through a hard time as Leia uses battle and diplomacy to fight off the Yuuzhan Vong as Han runs around on his little side quests. Han was very hard on Anakin following Chewbacca's death, blaming his son, telling him they could have saved Chewie, something he genuinely believes as much as he tries to fight those feelings. This is something Han would live to regret, but we're getting a little bit ahead of ourselves here. Han at one point tries fighting for Ord Mantell against the Vong. Roa, a friend of his who premiered in Han Solo's Revenge by Brian Daley, is captured, and he has to choose to either save the many or Roa, which helps Han start to realize that perhaps Anakin wasn't wrong to let Chewie die in favor of saving other lives, doing much the same under similar circumstances. Though thinking Roa may be alive at least till he has proof otherwise, Han is hell-bent on saving him. Another former ally, Rek Desh, betrays Han and joins the Peace Brigade, a group of humans working with the Vong to dodge death when they take over the galaxy, with the group seeing the Jedi and New Republic as inadequate to beat the new and rising threat. Also hoping to gain some points with their new potential order and find some influence in the new Vong galaxy that's starting to form. Droma is introduced here, Han saves him on Ord Mantell, and hopes to help him save his family. Droma becomes more important in the next book, but he is an adequate stand-in for Chewbacca within the series. Roa is an old ally of Han and is an OG scoundrel in the galaxy who knew Han for decades now. His wife recently died, so like Han, he's going through grief. He thinks Han is going to kill himself acting the way he does. By the end of the book, he is separated from Han, and as it turns out, he was being held hostage by the Vong, though this time Han refuses to lose a friend to the Yuuzhan Vong, and Agents of Chaos 2 explores these ideas more. Nom Anor is back as the pseudo-leader of the Yuuzhan Vong. He's really middle management, but for now he's kind of the figurehead, as they try to take new slaves for execution on Ord Mantell, as well as just making a new strategic zone. Honestly, though, the Vong are very secondary and more of something for Han to fight. We don't really explore their motivations all that much at this point. They're pretty much just faceless villains at this point in the series. C-3PO has some grief in this book. He also has an existential crisis, which compares the idea of death or deactivation to the way humans feel about death. This actually reflects some passages from Brian Daley's novel, where the droid Bullocks talks about the great fear of deactivation or becoming obsolete and just no longer being needed, something Han Solo would save Bullocks from. Probably one of the harder to catch references to Daley's work in this novel, but thematically it even takes some elements from Daley's work. Mara Jade has a notable moment here since she is given a sample that will allow her disease to go away, the one she has been battling since the beginning of the Vong Wars. We don't see much of it here, but she seems to have been cured, and we see more elaboration on that in the second part of this duology and as the series starts to go on. But basically what you need to understand is they are the Tears of Vergir, and they come into play a few times in this series. This book has a bittersweet tone and is all about loss and grief, which is kind of odd in a book series largely devoted to the grim reality of the Vong Wars and the near-apocalyptic stakes that accompany this war. Though despite that, a duology devoted to Han's world being shattered after losing the Being, who has been his friend longer than anyone else, along with the loss of his illusion of immortality, is sort of amazing. And not only is James Luceno able to write compelling novels time and time again, as we've covered a few times on this channel and will continue to cover in these videos, but he also went through something similar, losing Brian Daley, his deceased writing partner, who he took the torch for in this novel and ran with it. It makes this goofy space opera series into the realm of grief and does it in a way that feels very realistic, as Luceno masterfully creates this loving tribute to his friend and the world he created within the Han Solo trilogy years earlier. This is James Luceno's first novel in Star Wars, and proved to the team behind these novels that this guy was a dude who gets Star Wars and gets compelling narratives, and it makes this novel just simply wonderful, and he continues to be absolutely wonderful in his preceding several novels. This book brings up so much, lots of references to his late friend Brian Daley's solo trilogy, of course. He talks about Roa, Lucia, and the corporate sector, things that only pay off if you've read those Han Solo novels, but also make the many tributes to his friend more than just puddle-deep references. Not to mention, unlike the Daley novels, which were very restricted in non-original content, this book was allowed the whole Star Wars sandbox, bringing in many characters from the main saga. Daley wasn't allowed to touch that much since the original trilogy was still ongoing when he wrote the novels, and they didn't want to contradict themselves too much. Continuity being on the minds of the Star Wars Extended Universe team even before the Star Wars Extended Universe was really a thing. Droma joining Solo, which we will talk more about later, is also an abject lesson in opening back up in the face of grief. James Luceno thoroughly talks about how Droma doesn't fit Chewie's seat, literally, like Chewie is so big, but metaphorically too, since you can't just replace someone who meant a lot to you. This book was basically a masterpiece, and soon we'll talk about the second part of it when we come back for Agents of Chaos 2, Jedi Eclipse. Also, if you're interested in learning more about the new Jedi Order series, I have been covering them, and they are all in my Star Wars playlist, which is linked right here.